My name's Angelo, and welcome to We Want Picks. And I'm going to walk through the entire UFC Vegas 56 fight card. We're going to talk about DraftKings value, who should be in your lineup, who you should probably avoid, and we're going to talk about who I think wins these fights. And we're just going to try to blow through this pretty quick because we have 14 fights. And if you want a more detailed breakdown, we go into every single one of these fights in very, very grave detail. So check those out on the channel. Right now, we're just going to talk DraftKings and DraftKings only. And the first fight is Erin Blanchfield versus JJ Aldrich. Erin Blanchfield is a dominant grappler. That's what she does. She just smoked Amanda Maverick with 7 takedowns, scored 115 points in a decision, 12 minutes of control time. She also beat Alpar. She only had 3 takedowns in that fight, but she got off way more strikes and scored 126 points. I think this fight is more of the same. I think she's going to blow through JJ Aldrich, dominate with grappling, potentially get a stoppage, but you know, as phenomenal as Erin's submissions are, she tends to be wrestle, control. So I'm probably going to have Erin Blanchfield in my lineup at $9,600. JJ Aldrich is sort of a volume striker that needs that volume. She's a decision machine. I just don't see her pulling this off. I just absolutely don't see her pulling this off. So I don't think she's live at $6,600. Then we've got Fakhretdinov making his UFC debut against Andreas Michailidis. Andreas Michailidis coming off that loss to Alex Pereira. They basically used Michailidis as a springboard for Alex Pereira. He was able to take Pereira down twice. He just couldn't hold him down, and then he was stopped in the second round. The Bular win, Bular's not great, and then he lost to Buskauskas, obviously. But Renat, his opponent, he's making his UFC debut official after impressive Dana White looking for a fight. He's a dominant wrestler. He has heavy hands. Frankly, he could probably score really well. He could stop Michailidis. So Renat at $9,200 is probably solid value, somebody you could have in your lineup. Then we've got Jeff Molina taking on Zhumagulov. Jeff Molina, he's a really good striker. He has no problem getting into a war, and he uses kicks really well. He's fighting Zhalgas Zhumagulov. Zhumagulov has big, heavy punches, but he's a wrestler. He's a grappler. And normally, I lean towards the wrestlers in these fights because Jeff Molina is a striker, doesn't have a ton on the ground. But Jeff Molina was taken down in both of these fights, the Silva and Corey Lang. And it didn't matter. He still won those decisions. He still controlled the striking. And he still scored ridiculously well, one in a stoppage and one in a decision. So I like Jeff Molina to win this fight. I'm not going to spend $9,000 because Zhumagulov, yes, he's 1-3 in the UFC. His record is not fantastic, but he is a wrestler. He gets takedowns. He can control fights. And while I think he loses this fight, it's also very possible he takes Jeff Molina down, who is takedownable, and holds him down. So I'm going to leave this one alone. Of the people, 9,000 or more, there's a lot of people more that I'm more confident in than Jeff Molina. And Zhalgas at $7,200 is probably somewhat live. We got Tony Gravely at $8,400. Without question, he will be in my lineup. This dude is a takedown machine. 11, 1, 4, 7, 5. And then look at the points. 128, 138, 110. Yes, he was KO'd in the second round here. And anything's possible. This is very possible in this fight as well. He's fighting Johnny Munoz Jr. Johnny Munoz Jr. is a BJJ black belt. He's got decent striking, solid takedowns. But the reality is, I think Tony Gravely wins a wrestling decision, and I think it looks exactly like this. Simon Oliveira, Tony Gravely's last opponent, was also a grappler, and Tony Gravely took him down 11 times, tons of control time, scored 128 points at $8,400. I love it. He will be in my lineup, and let's just look at his opponent, Johnny Munoz. Johnny Munoz, I have a bet on Johnny Munoz. I bet him to win inside the distance decision, no action. He's stupid tough, so I don't see him getting stopped. In DraftKings, that works for me if I'm on the Tony Gravely side. Betting-wise, I took Johnny Munoz to win inside the distance decision, no action, because he could win by stoppage, probably loses the decision, and if he does, I'll get a refund. If he wins by stoppage, well, I'll get paid. I did that through Bet Online. If you go to our website, weonpicks.com/bets, you can jump into that bet. But this is a DraftKings video, so let's continue with DraftKings. Then we've got Benoit Saint Denny Where you at, buddy boy? Here we go. Benoit Saint Denny, and he's taking on Niklas Stolze. Benoit Saint Denny, he's a very good wrestler. He's got really well-timed shots, tons of pressure on top, and he takes real wrestling shots. He had 2 takedowns in this fight, which was a loss. But listen, 43 points it was a pretty one-sided loss, but 43 points in a loss is not terrible. And Salecki is a very different opponent than Niklas Stolze, because Stolze is a striker. And he has yet to find sort of his footing in the UFC. And look what Ameev did to him. Ameev took him down, controlled him. Ameev beat him somewhat handily. And I think that Benoit Saint Denis does the exact same thing. So Benoit Saint Denis at $8,500 is somebody that I wouldn't mind having in my lineup. And then we have a really interesting fight. This is a last-minute replacement. Damon Jackson, he's on his second stint in the UFC, and it's been a decent run, right? He beat Kamala Kirk in his last fight. He beat Charles Rosa. He lost to Ilia Topuria, but Ilia Topuria is solid. That's a good loss. He lost to he beat Mirsad Bektik, and Mirsad Bektik's very good. So he's had a good run, but he is a grappler. 2 takedowns, 6 takedowns, and he relies on that grappling to win his fights. And he's very good at it. His striking in the Kamala Kirk fight actually looked very good as well. But the dude's $9,500. He is fighting Dan Argueda. There's nothing here. He's making his UFC debut on short notice. But Dan Argueda is also a wrestler, and he doesn't even entertain the striking half the time. He will literally come across the cage, shoot a takedown, and go, go, go. And I really like Dan Argueda in this fight. I think $6,700. We have some heavy, heavy favorites. You're going to need some big underdogs. I think Dan Argueda is one of them. I really do. I like him to win the fight. I understand why Damon Jackson is such a heavy favorite. The guy's called the Leech because he's so hard to get off you if you're grappling. But I don't think Damon Jackson is going to get the shots off first. I think Dan Argueda is, and he's going to get the takedowns. He's going to get the control time. If you remember, a few months ago, we had a very similar situation, and I bet the short notice wrestler, and I had him in DraftKings, and he scored more points in a loss than his opponent did in a win. This could be a similar situation. So I like Dan Argueda here. You're going to need some big underdogs because this is a very top-heavy fight card. But I get it. People are clowning that pick, but I'm on the other side. Then we got Joe Salecki. Joe Salecki is a grappler. Coming off his first UFC loss, he did have 4 takedowns, but he struggled with some of the exchanges. He struggled with the striking, and Jared Gordon completely outstruck him and sort of dominated that department. Joe Salecki is fighting Alex Da Silva. Alex Da Silva is a slick striker with a wide array of attack, whether it's kicking, elbows, spinning. He is legit fast. He has legit power. He's got a bouncing style that he jumps in, jumps out. And he isn't just a striker. He also has fantastic wrestling and grappling. 3 takedowns, 1 takedown. Had a reversal in this fight. Yes, it was a loss to Brad Riddell, who's a killer. I like Alex Da Silva in this fight, and he's another guy. He's an underdog, $7,400. I like it. I like him to win this fight, and I don't necessarily trust Joe Salecki enough. Then we have a fight that you should not touch. I'm not even going to bother. Felice Herrig hasn't won a fight in 4 years. Karolina Kowalkiewicz hasn't won a fight in 4 years. Karolina's the better fighter, without question. But she just seems to have lost it. I mean, look at this. 5 in a row. And her last win was against Felice Herrig. The problem is, while I think she's the better fighter, she just doesn't seem to be there anymore. She lost it. Something has happened. And Felice Herrig may very well be able to bully her way to a win. So Felice Herrig probably going to win this fight, but don't touch it. Don't touch it. There's 14 fights. You don't need to put either one of these people in your DraftKings lineup. Then we have a crazy fight. We got Alonzo Menafield taking on Askar Marazov. Alonzo Menafield, a big boy, a big striker, got legit power in his hands. We have seen some wrestling, right? He took Ed Herman down, and that was a decision. His last fight was a decision. It was a loss. But the reason I'm mentioning decision because Alonzo struggled with his cardio in the past. That does not seem to be an issue anymore. His last 2 fights, his cardio was not a problem. And the Ed Herman fight, honestly, was a really good look. Fabio Charant, that was a weird submission. A Von Flue choke submission. He just had his shoulder. Was it a Von Flue? It was a weird submission. That was a weird fight. Either way, I think Alonzo Menafield wins this fight, but this is striker versus striker. Askar Mazharov is making his UFC debut, but there's a couple weird things going on. One, they have amended his record. Earlier in the week, what was his record earlier in the week? I forget what it was, but they took 5 wins away from him. 5 wins they took away from him, and then they gave him some losses. So now he's like 17-12 or something like that. And he had to take a year off between getting signed to the UFC and fighting in the UFC. Pretty sure there's some USADA stuff going on. So I like Menafield to win this fight, but either way, one of these dudes is getting knocked out. Pick your side. Pick your side, because both of these guys, whoever wins is going to score over 100 points. Then we got Ode Osborne taking on Zaruk Adashev. We have striker versus striker. Ode Osborne has heavy hands. He can be a little low volume sometimes, but he's got heavy hands. He's got some very real power, and he's a solid striker. And he's taking on Zaruk Adashev, who's a very technical striker. And Zaruk Adashev, at times, can have issues with grappling and striking. So Zaruk Adashev only has 7 professional fights. He only has 7 professional fights. He hasn't really found his footing in the UFC just yet outside of this win here. But he is a killer, and he will make a fight dirty and gross and ugly, and he can like really go in the pocket and make that happen. But he's a professional kickboxer, or at least was. I like Ode to win this fight. It is an MMA fight. We have seen Ode work some grappling in the past. So I do like him to win this fight. But at $8,900, I'd rather get somebody else at $92.93. Then we got Karine Silva, official UFC debut after a very solid outing on Dana White Contender Series. I like her to win this fight. I think she dominates this fight. But Poliana Botelho, I struggle with these names, guys, and you know that. But Poliana, she's a creative striker. At times, she can be a little too fancy, a little too showboaty, and that ends up being sloppy for her. But she does improve every single fight. She is starting to put things together. I just don't think it's going to be enough, because Karine Silva is just going to come forward, grapple like crazy, get those takedowns, drag her to the ground, and control her from there. So I like Karine. I think Karine honestly dominates this fight, and I love her at $8,200. I think that's incredible value. Then we got Mike Trizano taking on Lucas Almeida. Mike Trizano, he's an Ultimate Fighter winner. He's a really forward pressure, fun guy, comes forward, never stops, and he has a very, very solid fight IQ. He's a calculated striker, and he does a really good job mixing in his power and his speed. And he is taking on Lucas Almeida. Lucas Almeida, official UFC debut. He had a failed Contender Series fight about 7 months ago, but he's a really powerful striker. He loves heavy 1-2s. There's always something behind those. And if we look at Mike Trizano, he loses the technical striking matches. He loses against people like Dawodu. Let's go back to Trizano here. He lost to Dawodu because that was a technical striking match. But Lucas Almeida isn't really a technical guy. He is a striker. He headhunts a little bit. He's sort of a brawler. I think Mike Trizano wins this fight. I think it's a technical fight. I don't think he has any problems. I don't know if he's going to get a finish. So again, at $9,100, it's a lot of money to spend. I'd rather spend it on some of those higher price ones I mentioned earlier. Then we got the co-main event. Movsar Evloev taking on Dan Ige. Movsar's the pick. $9,400? Probably. He's the pick. Look at these scores, 138, 92. This was a low-scoring one, 66. But Mike Grundy took Movsar down a bunch. I think it was 6 times. 84, 110. I think it looks more of the same. 9 takedowns, 2, 4, 5. I think it's just a million takedowns, a ton of points. Dan Ige, he honestly, unfortunately for him, I don't know why they threw him at Korean Zombie. Then they threw him at Josh Emmett. I mean, Calvin Qatar. This dude has had a tough go, but he's very, very good. Very good. Good grappler, good striker. He's good everywhere, but I think Movsar has no problems with it. $9,400, I'm very confident in that. I keep talking about, I'm not going to do Mike Trizano at 91 when I can get Movsar at 94 and then work in one of the underdogs I mentioned. Then main event of the evening, Alexander Volkov taking on Garzinio Rozenstruik. Here's the thing. It is a 5-round fight. I do think he wins this fight. And I'm trying to find a 5-round fight. Trying to find a 5-round fight that he won, and I can't. And that's the problem. I think Volkov wins this fight. I think he's the far better fighter everywhere except raw power. So I do think he wins this fight. And historically, you need somebody in the main event to do well in DraftKings. He's $8,600. He probably cruises to a decision win if he can avoid the big power of Garzinio. But let's look at a 3-round decision win. Tybura, 66 points. Let's add another 33 points. So he's going to score 90, 100 if it's just the Tybura fight with 2 extra rounds, which I think it is. So you should probably have Volkov in your lineup. Let's look at Rozenstruik. He's either losing 13-point decisions or taking your head off. That is it. Those are the only 2 options. The only 2 options for Rozenstruik. So if you think he's going to knock Volkov out, grab him at $7,600 and you'll get 100 points, something to that effect. I think Volkov cruises to a decision win. So, I'm going to explore if he's in my lineup because $8,600 is not cheap. And Volkov isn't the highest scoring guy because it's just strikes. It's just strikes. No takedowns, no controls, just strikes. But we'll see what happens in that fight. We'll see what happens in these fights. A lot to pick from here. Let me know your picks below. And don't forget to join our free DraftKings League at WeWantPicks.com/DraftKings.